What's this?
Guys, I'm so old that when I was in college, we actually had to plug into the internet via Ethernet cable. You know, we didn't have Wi-Fi yet. But at the time, we didn't care because it was the fastest
Yeah, but you don't want to play video games on Wi-Fi. Come on, man.
internet any of us had ever had, which was so good for downloading music, playing video games, and other stuff. But one thing that quickly ended up on everyone's dorm room PC was World of Warcraft,
Oh,
the
God.
MMORPG released in 2004. Now, I remember
Amen.
first being confused, seeing one friend alone in his dorm playing a game with another friend alone in his dorm, but soon I got what they were doing and understood why this game was so popular. And it went on to become the most popular MMORPG in history, hitting 12 million
20 years this year.
subscribers in 2010 and 100 million player accounts by 2014. Pretty sure in 2014 that was the entire population of the world was 100 million, so everyone in the world was playing it. That's a fact. And unlike many trends from my college days, World of Warcraft has stuck around. Now, this all begs the question, why? Well, today we're gonna look at why this game has remained so popular, how it helps us better understand our own humanity, and how it might even have the power to save civilization. I'm being serious, I am not kidding.
Okay. This is going to be interesting. Let's see what this is about.
About that one. Before we keep going, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Icy Veins. If you are an avid World of Warcraft player and you want to dive a little bit deeper into the game and have access to stats, guides, maps, news, all that sort of stuff, check out Icy Veins. And definitely check it out if you want to learn about the newest expansion, World of Warcraft, The War Within. We have a link to it down in the description. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, so I want to start by looking at philosopher Paul Ricoeur's theory of narrative identity. Now, Ricoeur argues that we can't actually develop a sense of who we are through stuff like deep introspection or some sense of intuition. Rather, as philosopher Jos de Mol summarizes, self-knowledge is in almost all cases mediated. We know ourselves only via the indirect route of the cultural expression of ourselves in actions, utterances, images, music, nutrition, fashion, housing, institutions, religion, and so on. This means that we create and use external narratives to make sense of our own internal lives. It's like when you listen to someone else's sad song to help your own process of heartbreak, or how watching
Yeah, okay. Hold on. Let's check that out again.
know ourselves only via the indirect route of the cultural expression of ourselves in actions, utterances, images, music, nutrition, fashion, housing, institutions, religion, and so on. This means
So, without like these outside references, then it's hard to describe like how our feelings and whatnot.
that we create and use external narratives to make sense of our own internal lives. It's like
External narratives to help explain the internal lives.
when you listen to someone else's sad song to help your own process of heartbreak, or how watching Scrubs helped me make sense of being kind of a dork in college. Now, this
Oh
doesn't
my
mean making
God,
sense of
yes,
self
that is so true. And it's like the ultimate, like, aside from, oh my God, what's the other TV show? Psych. It's just like the buddy bro TV show that everybody can hopefully can relate to at some point of their life.
just a narrative construct. Rather, since our lives often lack the coherence and decisive closure that we see in stories, crafting narratives can be a helpful way to make sense of the chaos. And these narratives then structure the way we live our lives. You know, for me, seeing how JD dealt with the breakup on Scrubs helped me picture myself moving on from the time I got dumped after dressing up as Steve Irwin to impress someone at a Halloween party.
Oh no.
It was after Steve.
Oh no. After he died? Come on, man. That's just, come on. That was your first mistake there.
Irwin, and the thing happened to him. I spoke in an Australian accent the whole night.
Oh
I won the
no.
costume contest, and then she left me for her ex-boyfriend. According to DeMol,
Well, that's
story
why.
is complicated by games like World of Warcraft. Now, just like narratives in traditional media, games help us construct our sense of self in the form of our ludic identity. Scholars use ludic, the Latin word for play, when they're talking about game theory. Now, Demul describes how ludic identity differs from narrative identity, writing, whereas in the case of narrative identity, the predominant tendency is toward an increase of closure and thus concordance, i.e. consistency. In the case of ludic identity, the predominant tendency is toward an increase of openness. The ludic self is in search for new possibilities in order to increase the field of possible action.
So ludic identity is almost like limitless, boundaryless. The intent is to explore a new self.
It's like how when you need a break from your main character, World of Warcraft will let you create alternates, up to 65 per account.
See, and that's funny because, yeah, and with the War Within, playing alts has never been easier with the whole warband system thing too, so that's pretty nice.
So narrative identity is about making sense of the past, while ludic identity is about creating new possibilities for the future. That means narrative identities tend to make us identify with our previous choices and behaviors, which can limit our conception of what's possible. Now, in contrast, the active play helps us seek out new ways to behave. And we see this in how players construct their characters in World of Warcraft. As researchers Tiziana Mancini and Federica Sabia,
you can kind of see this too happening in like Bethesda games, like you're going to create like a character that's almost opposite of who you feel like that who you are in order to act those out, and just for better or worse, so I can kind of see that the ludic identity.
Note, oftentimes the avatar is the product of an idealization process, which involves differentiating the avatar from the actual self so that it resembles more closely the ideal self.
Aha. So in a way, it may be opposite, but in reality, it's closer to what the actual self is. Interesting. So I think I kind of see this too, like with my experience with like playing around with like in VR chat, and how it's so easy to just adopt the identity of the avatar or whatnot, or just knowing that you're in this level of anonymity where you can kind of just freely express yourself. And again, for better or worse, we see that with people in VR chat, with what they say. It kind of gives you an insight of their actual self. So maybe that's kind of what this is. And exercising or developing that ludic identity helps bring that actual self out. That's kind of interesting.
While someone's offline character is typically a source of reference for their avatar, the avatar gives them room to experiment with character traits they wish they had or didn't have. Often that means crafting characters that are more extroverted and conscientious and less neurotic. Crafting a ludic identity thereby gives us the opportunity to break free of our narrative identity.
See, that's pretty cool because like we see that in RPGs just in general, and I think that's what's kind of exciting with those types of games, is being able to explore. And now it doesn't always have to be like a drastic change or anything like that, but it's like me, for example. I mean, I'm a short king. I might create like a 7-foot character just because it would be cool to experience the world of Warcraft being 7 feet tall,
In a ludic identity thereby gives us the opportunity to break free of our narrative identity. And according to Demul, the ludic identity is powerful, playing a constitutive role in our cognitive development and in the construction of our identity. It's arguably more impactful than our narrative identity because of the intense emotional investment players pour into gaming. As Sherry explains, when you play a video game, you enter into the world of the programmers who made it. You have to do more than identify with the character on the screen, you must act for it. Identification through action has a special kind of hold. Like playing a sport, it puts people into a highly focused and highly charged state of
Okay, well, identification through action has a special kind of hold.
mind. For many people, what is being pursued in the video game is not just a score, but an altered state. That altered state is facilitated by the creative potentials of our ludic identity, which can enable us to explore our selfhood and decision-making processes, and even work through old emotional hangups.
Wow. I can kind of see that in just retrospect and just looking back. kind of a self-reflection as well. I mean, just seeing, like, for instance, in The Last of Us, you know, very dramatic and you know, the story, the plot line, and then just trying to imagine what you would do in those situations. I think through you playing, we'll see, but that's different though, because you're actually, those are like set characters, but still, it's like putting yourself in that position through the character, through the avatar.
World of Warcraft alternative futures not constrained by past behaviors are especially possible because the game innately posits your character as a work in progress who can improve any number of skills or crafts as you play. Now, getting good at the game is at its core about working on yourself. That's right, you don't have to go to therapy anymore.
Yo, let's go. World of Warcraft is my therapy.
Just play World of Warcraft. This is not medical advice. Don't follow it. World of Warcraft is especially ripe for identity construction because unlike traditional linear games that limit choices by design, World of Warcraft is what game scholars call a rhizomatic game.
Rhizomatic.
Choices by design, World of Warcraft is what game scholars call a rhizomatic game. Now, the rhizome is a concept that philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari used to describe nonlinear networks that lack a sense of traditional order or connection. In the context of World of Warcraft, the game is rhizomatic because it doesn't lead you down one consistent path. Instead, players have seemingly infinite possibilities which require...
But, you know, if you want to be like S tier, you got to follow that meta, bro. And then everybody's going to like try to get the same weapons, play the same way, have the same perks, etc.
Constant decision making. According to anthropologist Bonnie Nardi, this makes possible a release of creativity and a sense of empowerment. And often those decisions force you to examine your fundamental morality. One study from 2012 found that video game players, rather than disengaging with their real-world sense of right and wrong, rely heavily on their gut sense of morality, making gameplay less a chill way to blow off steam while shooting murlocs, and more like a process of actualizing your own ethical code in a different setting.
That's interesting, because I kind of see, I've seen that, like, at least in myself. It's just a way, it's like a playground to exercise that, yeah, for sure. Especially in like Bethesda games where you just have a lot of that rhizomatic, I guess like those RPGs would be a rhizomatic game as well, because it's just more so than Warcraft. I think it spans out just disregarding like the mechanics, I guess. There's a little bit more openness and freedom in those types of games. And like Baldur's Gate.
Setting. And for Demol, the act of forming your ludic identity can have profound implications on your real-world sense of self. Indeed, organizational researcher John C. Lee Brown even said he'd rather hire a level 70 guildmaster from World of Warcraft than an MBA from Harvard for a corporate job.
Oh my God.
Now we're gonna push in, okay? Do not go all the way into the throne.
Yeah, it's that classic meme. That classic meme that, you know, you can put that on your resume. You're level 70 guildmaster. Which, yes, and I've discussed this too with some friends. It does show, you know, it is a good example of some good team building skills, leadership skills, and whatnot. But I think it all just depends if that person is exercising and utilizing their time playing Warcraft to explore, you know, that part of their identification.
Room before the door entrance. Please, guys, do not be cheesy. Do not run in there. Do anything crazy.
Because convincing your guild that it's worth just one more try at that 3 a.m. raid for a chance of sweet loot drop isn't all that different from rallying your office underlings to finish their deliverables on a big project.
Oh yeah.
We all hope that our managers also play games so they're just like us. But Rhizomatic...
Nah, managers are not just like us.
Games like World of Warcraft aren't just helping you fine-tune your identity in a vacuum. It's also a deeply social game. Indeed, one study found that players' favorite aspect of the game is the social interaction it facilitates. So let's see how our in-game interactions are...
And ironically, Delves, which is a welcoming new feature for like solo-centric players, there's like been so much hype, which is nice because, you know, it expands the different ways that you can play. But yeah, I mean, I think the social aspect is definitely will still trump even like a solo delve run. Just being part of something greater, like a bigger objective, you know, like either a raid or even just a dungeon group. Something that requires a little bit more coordination.
Actually shaping who we are and how we
And honestly, too, like the role playing aspect of it as well, which is kind of cool.
behave right here in the real
Not
world.
like that,
It
though.
helps to view World of Warcraft as a subculture, specifically a leisure subculture. As scholar
Okay.
Renee Glass notes, functioning in the subculture requires a social contract, social etiquette, and other behavioral protocols which govern social interaction. For example, you go looting with your teammates, and when you're divvying up the spoils, you're supposed to honestly choose need or greed when you roll. Players
Right.
take the honor system seriously. You know, pretending you need something you're merely planning to sell, especially if another teammate actually needs it, can even get you kicked off a team.
Yeah, that's pretty jacked. There's definitely social contracts and you know, rules that are like unspoken, right?
Guild. Succeeding at the game requires collaboration, which creates incentives to conform to these social norms. There's often a general sense of reciprocity on display, even in fleeting interactions, like when you do a kill assist to save a random player a trip back to the graveyard, or when tailors in capital cities stitch bags for new players. But attaining
This isn't all anything new to World of Warcraft, but it has definitely allowed these concepts, you know, to reach a wider view or a wider group of audience. However many players they said that WoW has acquired in the 20 years.
mastery at certain skills doesn't just help your character, it can also build your social capital within specific communities as you collaborate on ever more difficult raids. As scholar
Right.
Eric T. Lofgren writes, friendships are formed within the game. Large numbers of players work together for months to achieve common goals, and many players strive to create a believable alter ego in the virtual world, complete with the weight of responsibility and the expectations of others. Because of this, some scholars argue that MMORPGs aren't actually games, but sprawling social spaces.
I agree with this, and it's so funny that people are starting to say this, and it's a little bit more accepting now. It just seems so funny that maybe 15 years ago or something, this would have just been laughed at, but it really is a social space. This whole thing about this whole like metaverse, you know, BS. This is it. You don't create. You don't build. It's just gonna happen naturally. And so that's why like Fortnite, World of Warcraft, things like that. That's the real these sprawling social communities, this metaverse, that concept with an alter ego and whatnot.
Research led by scholar Dimitri Williams concluded that while games can't completely compensate for the so-called loneliness epidemic that plagues contemporary life, they can provide space for civic revitalization, i.e. making people feel like part of a community.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, it may seem grim and gloomy to think that it's a substitute, but with that loneliness pandemic, you know, I mean, hey, especially late, you know, as from COVID days, things like this is helpful. I mean, just for like mental health. And in a way, it's like it's a game, but it's still reality because there's still a player on the other side of that screen. You always got to think about that. And then there's the social contracts that involve that, you know, like racism, hate speech. Aside from the actual like terms and conditions of the program or the platform you're playing on, the game itself, you know, you generally exercise those social contracts. You try to maintain those even outside of the game, at least if you're not a psychopath or a sociopath.
We see this across digital gaming environments, which are generally characterized by shared, arguably stressful activities that are particularly effective at facilitating identity fusion, especially when the experience
Identity fusion. Effective in facilitating identity fusion.
are challenging and engaging.
What is that? Like melding the alter ego with like the real?
Consequently, researchers find that the resulting friendships are more intimate than friendships formed in other online spaces. But specific aspects
I can see that because there's always that common goal of like the raid, there's like shared traumatic experience, like having to grind to some raid boss, for 4-6 hours a night until you can finally get that clear. I've definitely experienced that, and that is a bonding experience that's tough to duplicate or replicate outside.
of World of Warcraft may be extra conducive to community.
Like just like on a Discord server or any other online communities, as this guy said.
Such as the raid scenarios that require players to repeatedly coordinate their movements while under intense pressure.
I'm coming up with 32 point.
Oh no, of course.
Repeating, of course.
Look at this, dude. It's like 420p. That's insane.
Percentage of survival.
What a
Thomas
classic.
Alvey argues that this kind of collaborative action in urgent conditions is highly generative of trust and belonging. So you get all the bonding of military service without the drama.
Yeah, there you go.
That you might have killed people. The social elements of World of Warcraft can even take precedent over the competitive aspects, potentially subverting the
I gotta change that.
intentions. Williams and co. found that 60% of players interviewed reported belonging to a social guild, and their behavior within those groups led researchers to conclude that members and leaders were aware of the need for a certain level of maturity, responsibility, and player welfare. They concluded that the level of mutual care exhibited in these groups is remarkable given that the game is centered ostensibly around functional, not psychological or social goals. It is
That's important because what I've noticed, like in WoW classic guilds, there's going to be more, function centered, objective oriented, and they just don't give a shit about who you are, what you contribute to the community outside of just stats and numbers, and it's a shame because the social aspect of these kind of online communities, these games, these MMOs, I think that's like maybe 60% of the fun, if I were to break it down simplistically like that. And so I feel like those types of players, you do you, but I feel like they don't get the full experience.
clear that social guilds go well past the game's goals in creating and maintaining community. Just as your identity within the game differs from your real-life identity while still being authentic to who you are, the ways you socially engage while gaming also reveal this authentic character. As media theorist Marshall McLuhan writes, like our vernacular tongues, all games are media of interpersonal communication, and they could have neither existence nor meaning except as extensions of our immediate inner lives. But what does this game-facilitated sociality look like when it steps outside? Can it tell us anything meaningful about society at large, or even shape what society looks like? Now, we've seen how World of Warcraft shapes individual and communal identity, but for McLuhan, games also function as mirrors to society, culture, and politics. They serve as a reaction to the material conditions of the real world, which means that it isn't always pretty. As with any online community, World of Warcraft has its share of cliched, trollish behaviors like player killing. McLuhan notes that it is precisely a game's ability to mirror everyday life that makes it so compelling. Writing, for fun or games to be welcome, they must convey an echo of workaday life. On the other hand, a manner society without games is one.
For fun or games to be welcome, they must convey an echo of workaday life. On the other hand, a manner or society without games is one sunk in the zombie trance. Oh my god. This is so true. But that is kind of funny that like games require some, I guess that's like the grinding aspect of MMOs. That's probably why. Because, regular work life is grindy. There's that element there that echoes the workaday life.
Aside from the material pressures of routine and convention, observing and questioning. Games like World of Warcraft allow us to rebel against those constraints with a freedom that we might not have offline. The popularity of many role-playing activities invented by players within the game aren't super relevant to the goals of the game. This makes them potentially subversive, even requiring players to creatively test the limits of the game's design. Azeroth is, of course, nothing like, say, Cincinnati. But when millions of people exist and play within its world, it recreates certain dynamics that can help us process our everyday lives. There's a reason why the laborious and repetitive gameplay of leveling a character to the 60 cap is called grinding. As McLuhan puts it, games are a sort of artificial paradise like Disneyland, or some utopian vision by which we interpret and complete the meaning of our daily lives.
See, I've heard there's that idea of like the theme park MMOs too. That's kind of funny that I don't know if that's related to this idea.
Aspects of World of Warcraft, like its emphasis on self-improvement through difficult and repetitive work, mirror real phenomena and provide catharsis from the pressure of our daily lives. And this is why, somewhat remarkably, the way players conduct themselves in game can offer a viable model for how large populations might behave in real life. Let's consider the corrupted blood incident of 2005.
Oh, I remember about this. That was kind of cool. Oh my god, I forgot about that.
The boss of a new region, Hakar the Soul Flayer, cast so-called corrupted blood
It bugged out.
Intended to remain contained within that region.
Yeah, and like people brought it back to the cities and stuff. That was so funny.
Programming oversights resulted in corrupted blood spreading across the game world, partly via infected animal companions and asymptomatic NPCs.
Oh my god, it was COVID-19 in World of Warcraft like 15 years before. Holy shit.
It's all my other NPCs out there, I see you, but I can't do anything about it. It's eerily prescient of what went down in 2020. As a number of gameplay elements helped fuel the uncontrollable epidemic,
I swear I didn't watch this before.
Died off. Meanwhile, players with healing abilities acted as first responders, rushing to infected areas to help the sick. Other players purposefully sought to get infected to further spread the disease. Blizzard Entertainment attempted to quarantine the infected, which didn't really work out. Many players did the most relatable thing: opted out of World of Warcraft entirely while they waited for the bug to be fixed. Now,
wow, what a concept, right? Shelter in place, huh? It probably went better in Azeroth than it did on Earth.
this historic and weird gaming accident suggests something consequential about virtual worlds. Phenomena like pandemics are notoriously hard to study in a controlled environment, because you can't run around infecting people with SARS just to see what happens. Even if you think it'll be a cool science project, don't do it.
Whoa.
As a result, most pandemic research is conducted via observation amidst a litany of uncontrollable variables, or retrospectively after the events. But the reaction to the World of Warcraft pandemic mirrored aspects of real-life pandemic response, suggesting new avenues of epidemiological research. So if you've played this game before, you're basically an epidemiologist. So tell your parents that. This led Lofgren and others to observe that game worlds could actually be used to study human behavior during pandemics in ways that would otherwise be impossible. Which, even if you don't care about epidemiology or video games, if so, why are you still watching? That is a very cool and important thing. You know, just in case there's ever another pandemic.
And there's going to be one, you know it. There's already forecasts maybe in the next 10 years or something. The next 5-10 years. But at least now we should know better and know what to do. Hopefully, right?
Cases continue to rise.
And if World of Warcraft can accurately model how people behave during pandemics, it could likely also help us understand human behavior during other societal events. You know, maybe we could see what people do during earthquakes or a rapid climate change, or I don't know, your favorite restaurant closes. How does that affect you? Which all means that I was wrong back in college when I sometimes judged my buddies thinking that they were escaping the world.
That's right.
By skipping class to play World of Warcraft all day. Rather than being a pure abstraction from human life, the game offers a unique peek into human behavior.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why it's what makes these online community worlds just so intriguing and interesting. And people just tend to come back for more.
Behaviors.
Oh, it's a lot better than we usually do.
All right, chums,
ready, guys?
let's do this. Leroy
Oh,
which means that it
classic.
can teach us about everything from human connectivity to self-improvement to how we respond during pandemics. And this can be useful to all of us, even if you have no desire to win the Stranglethorn fishing extravaganza. But what do you guys think? Is World of Warcraft less about escaping the real world and more about shaping it? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this.
I would say so. I agree. That was a good video. Let's make sure we link this here. Let's try to do this live here since this is the first time. Let's see, how do I do this? Can video games make you a better person? All right. That was a good vid. I think it's a good like reflection, right? Like as I was kind of saying, like with the whole ludic identity, it helps shape it. It can help people understand themselves a little better. Putting themselves in you know, safe but stressful situations. They can kind of see how they would react to them. And the whole sense of just being part of a community, even if it is virtual, there's still people behind it. So that's always something that's unique to these games. And I think that's probably the key here. That's different from the single player RPGs that I was mentioning, is that those are RPGs, these are MMOs. So there's a lot more. Single player RPGs allow for more freedom in developing and expressing that identity because there's less constraints, I guess. But what would be more useful is being able to express that identity in an online community, because then it's almost kind of reflecting, you know, what would happen in a real world, just as they were saying. It's just kind of the World of Warcraft pandemic just served kind of as a study to the real world pandemics. So pretty cool vid.